When you think about America, you think of this global superpower, right? The richest, most powerful country in history. But what if I told you that its rise to the top was, well, a total accident? It was anything but guaranteed. So today, we're going to dive into this wild story of how a continent that nobody really wanted for over 100 years somehow ended up changing everything.
So yeah, that's the big question, right? How did this ignored piece of land become the world's #1 superpower? It's a journey that's just packed with pure luck, crazy ambition, and some unbelievable twist of fate.
Okay, so to understand this, we have to go way back. And it all kicks off with a massive misunderstanding. See, when those first European explorers were sailing the high seas, North America wasn't what they were looking for at all. It was just in the way.
Think about Christopher Columbus. His whole goal was to find a fast track to Asia, right? He was dreaming of all those valuable spices. So when he hits land in the Caribbean, he's absolutely convinced he's made it. He even calls the islands the Indies. But, oops, no spices. So what does he do? He pivots hard. He starts telling the King and Queen of Spain all about gold. And just like that, the mission completely changes. The new prize wasn't spices, it was gold.
And here's the crazy part. While Spain is going all in on this new gold rush, the entire continent of North America, it gets completely ignored. For more than 100 years, it was basically written off as the useless lands up here, just this big, empty wilderness that nobody wanted, because all the shiny gold and silver was being found way down south. And this really shows you what everyone was thinking back then. Spain and Portugal, they just beelined it for Central and South America. They were all about conquering empires and pulling out as much wealth as they could. So what did that leave for England and France? Pretty much the leftovers. They got stuck with the supposedly less interesting northern lands. But being ignored like that actually set the stage for something completely different to happen up north. This wasn't a story about getting rich quick. It was a story about people actually settling down, trying to survive, and, eventually, a massive, chaotic fight for who would control it all.
So let's look at how this played out. You have the English setting up Jamestown way back in 1607. And for the next 100 years or so, their colonies just get bigger and bigger, all along the coast. Meanwhile, the French are claiming this huge chunk of land in the middle of the continent. And, you guessed it, by 1754, they're bumping right into each other. There was no more room to expand without a fight, and that's exactly what happened. A huge war for control of the continent breaks out, what we call the French and Indian War. Now this is where things get really interesting. It's a huge turning point. Britain wins the war, which sounds great for them, right? But winning was incredibly expensive. They're buried in debt. So how do they decide to pay for it? By slapping a bunch of new taxes on the American colonies. Now just try to imagine that. You're forced to pay taxes to a government on the other side of an ocean, and you have zero say in how that money gets spent. That's taxation without representation. And boy, did that light the fuse for the American Revolution.
But winning the war didn't solve everything. Not by a long shot. The first attempt at a government for this new nation was, well, a complete and total mess. You basically had 13 little states, all acting like they were their own independent countries. The whole experiment was about to fall apart. It was only when the Founding Fathers got together and hammered out the Constitution that they created a government that could actually, govern.
Okay, so now they've got a stable government. What's next? They looked west. And what happened after that was one of the fastest, most dramatic land grabs in the history of the world.
And honestly, a huge chunk of this was just pure dumb luck. Over in Europe, you've got Napoleon Bonaparte, and he is desperate for cash to pay for his wars. So he makes this absolutely shocking decision. The Americans had only asked to buy the port of New Orleans, but Napoleon basically said, forget that, you can have the whole thing. His words were, we will sell it all. And boom. Just like that, the United States literally doubled in size overnight.
And just look at these prices. It was just one gamble and lucky break after another that let the U.S. build a continental empire for pennies on the dollar. I mean, $15 million for all of Louisiana, another $15 million for a massive piece of land from Mexico, and just over $7 million for Alaska. We're talking about acquiring an entire continent for what sounds like pocket change today. It's wild. And it wasn't just about those big, flashy purchases either. The country grew piece by piece. They bought Florida from Spain. They annexed Texas after it broke away from Mexico. They split the Oregon Territory with the British. They took a huge part of northern Mexico through war and another small purchase. I mean, in the span of just 50 years, the nation went from being stuck on the East Coast to stretching all the way from sea to shining sea. And this hunger for more land, well, it got a little weird. This is honestly one of my favorite little historical facts. They passed something called the Guano Islands Act. It literally said that any American citizen could claim any uninhabited island they found as long as it was covered in guano, that's bird droppings. Why? Because it was a super valuable fertilizer back then. I mean, if that doesn't perfectly capture that relentless, almost obsessive drive to expand, I don't know what does. But all this incredible growth was hiding a deep and what would turn out to be a fatal flaw. The nation was getting bigger, sure, but it was also growing apart. It was being torn in two over the issue of slavery. This was, without a doubt, the country's greatest trial.
And the division was it was stark. There was no way to reconcile it. You had the North, which was industrializing, and where slavery was illegal, and most people saw it as a great moral evil. And then you had the South, which was all farming. And its entire economy, its entire way of life, was built on the backs of enslaved people. There was just no middle ground here. No compromise was possible.
So, the tipping point, the final straw, was the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. The Southern states were terrified that he was going to abolish slavery, so they decided they were done. They couldn't stay in the United States anymore. They chose to secede, to leave the Union, and form their own country.
And this, of course, led to a brutal, bloody civil war that just tore the nation in half. After 4 incredibly long years of fighting, the North finally won. That victory did 2 huge things. It preserved the country as one single union, and crucially, it ended slavery for good. The United States was whole again, but it was a country that was forever deeply changed by that terrible conflict. So, having been forged in the fire of that Civil War, a reunified and now rapidly industrializing America was finally ready to look past its own borders and step onto the world stage for the very first time.
And around the turn of the 20th century, America started making some big strategic moves. You had the Spanish-American War, which basically finished off the old Spanish Empire and handed the U.S. control of places like Puerto Rico and the Philippines. Then, annexing Hawaii gave them this crucial naval base right in the middle of the Pacific. And of course, building the Panama Canal. That was a game changer. It gave the American Navy a shortcut to move between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans almost instantly.
And the guy behind a lot of this was President Theodore Roosevelt. He had this very clear idea. If you want to be a world power, you need the muscle to back it up. So what did he do? He built the second largest navy in the entire world, and he wasn't afraid to use it as a big stick to project American influence all over the globe.
So, you fast forward to 1914, right on the brink of World War I, and the transformation is just complete. That continent nobody wanted, those useless lands that explorers just sailed past, it had become a massive industrial and military power, totally ready to play a huge, decisive role in the century to come. When you step back, it really is a staggering story, isn't it? It's a story of pure accident, incredible luck, brutal conflict, and just this relentless ambition. A journey from being a total afterthought to becoming a global superpower. And that really leaves us with one big question to think about. If all of that was America's first chapter, what's going to define its next?